Hey guys, I'm Jens Bogren. We're at Fascination Street Studios and I'm gonna walk you through a little bit of mixing here. We're gonna look at the promo song for the Über Metal collection, the BD 120 and the BH4 plugins. Fantastic Ampknobs, if I may say so myself. There's some really cool tips and tricks in here, so let's dive into it. I'm working in Pro Tools here with a mix, and this is, just a 1 minute song. Let's have a listen first, and then we can look a little bit at a few of the tips and tricks that I usually do when I mix and what I'm actually using in here. So let's have a listen from the beginning. You can skip 1 minute now if you already heard this a few times. Pretty heavy stuff. Let's check out what I have going here. For the drums, this is all like programmed stuff. The song is made by Peter Back, aka Riff Rocks. He also made the drums for this. He used something else. I changed it into my own stuff here once I dove into the mix. This is a little bit unorthodox maybe, but I'm actually using two kits at the same time. First, the Eloy Casagrande kit. If we solo listen to that, it sounds something like this. I just love that kit so much. I wanted to have it in there. It's also our latest drum release, so why not? But then I wanted to add a little bit more fat to it. So in a pretty extreme setting, I actually stole or used a preset from Dave Otero, the Dissident Aggressor. And then I kind of tweaked that into something. So if we listen to only that. So it's a little bit more of a roomy kind of thing. And then I blend them together. I kind of just get a little bit more of everything, It's nothing that I perhaps usually do, like overdubbing cymbals and stuff like this, but it happens. And here I thought it fit. To get that even more powerful, I'm also adding two more samples here. Kick sample. And on its own, it sounds a little bit weird maybe. It's because I've distorted it and I added in. I usually don't sit and solo listen, when I do these kind of things. Throw it on and do whatever I need to add whatever it is I'm missing in the core sound. Here it's a cheek slap sample from the, my own signature drum sample pack released some years ago. And on this, there's some EQ, not much going on. A bit more EQ, transient designer to add a bit more attack, and then decapitator, this old classic of a plugin in punish mode. That one distorts quite heavily here, and then some post EQ, just a bass lift that I at some point felt could be cool. And beyond that, I have the Mag EQ automated, which you can see I'm running off subs and lows. That one kicks in every time there are double kicks in the very end, I guess. Because if I don't do that, the sum of the low end will kind of build up. It's a pretty common thing that I do. Either that I add another kick, whether that would be an actual mic or a sample, as soon as it needs to be a little bit more heavier when there's room for it. And then I would clear up the mix a little bit or automate an EQ like this as soon as there are double kicks. Because otherwise it's impossible to get a solid low end. It will get too much as soon as there are doubles, and it will get a little bit thin when there are slower beats. Beyond that, I have a added snare. It's called Snare Drum Meat. It's probably because I'm using the meat stick sample. Let's check this out. I'm using Slate Trigger 2 for these meat stick. There are 3 here that I didn't use. Let's just remove those. Wanka, great name for a sample. Meat stick dry. Okay, so I've tuned this down a little bit. This actually won't follow the pitch of the original snare. It'll be a little bit lower, and you can hear that it's distorted. It sounds pretty weird on its own, but what I'm doing with this, it's a trick that I do. I kind of like pitch it down, distort it, and phase reverse it against the original snares. So that way it kind of scoops out and gives this like low end and high end push to it. Some may say sanct anger, but I like a ringy snare. I love it when it, extends the snare into the mix, and you get these guitars on and they eat all the frequencies, but to avoid your drums sounding like plop, plop, plop in the end, I kind of like this extended thing. You can do that with reverb or rooms. I do that too, but I also usually like a little bit of, just adds character and aggression, I guess. So that's it. Those are the drums. If anyone's interested, I think this Eloy kit, I used the Greasy Grinner, Slippery Knot preset, and I've tweaked that a little bit. I don't remember how. To be honest, I'm a kind of feel mixing guy, don't think too much. I act to whatever I hear, and, tried out some different presets. This one seemed to sit well, and then I do whatever is needed, to be honest. That's a great mix walkthrough, isn't it? If you want more in-depth stuff, like, the kind of few hours mix course, you should look into my Nail the Mix courses, where I do mix like Opeth, and now there's a new one coming out with The Haunted. And those are long, very long. But here you get kind of the crash course. All right, so all these drums, the 2 drum kits that I'm using, the kick and snare, added samples to add whatever I was missing from that. Those run into a drum bus here, and nothing really special about that. But I use 2 parallel compressors here as well. It's actually 2 soft tube plugins, Dynamite I like, and the Zener limiter, which is also very cool. I add them to the drum sum bus here. That one has a little bit of transient shaper. The main reason why I'm using that is to keep it fully in phase with the other ones, because the soft tube plugins has a little bit of weird oversampling filter that you can get comp filtering in the very highs if you use them in parallel. So to be able to use them in parallel, I need to have another soft tube plugin in there. Yeah, a little bit too technical for this video maybe. All of these then gets feed into my drum master bus here, and here I do have a little bit of like low end compression going. Isn't that enough then for the kicks that I earlier said that I automated an EQ on? Well, it helps as well, but it's not enough. It would like compress the lows too much if I would like fix my kick low end problems with only this. Then there's a little bit of EQ. I'm actually using a low cut, kind of just to tighten up the kit a little bit. That's something that I don't like always do, but I would usually try it and see how it makes the phase of the drum sit. Sometimes I'll also try like an absolute phase on the whole drum kit to see how that works, how it sits with the bass, etc. All right, and beyond this, we have the bass. The bass here is actually two signals. We can see them down here. It's a DI and then something that I got from Peter. The DI is just a regular DI. Then I'm putting on the bass knob STD on this. So it has that like kind of Ampeg kind of grind to it. Then there is one signal here that I got from Peter that sounds like this. Which is more of that kind of Sansamp meet dark glass kind of sound. And those two are mixed together. to get a little bit more grit. Now this one was already high passed at some point. If this one would be full range, I would probably work with some sort of filter for these things as well. And flip the face, maybe auto line from Sound Radix to make them sit, but this already worked fine. Then these goes into a bass master track. Doesn't have to do that, but I did it. That's usually my setup. You can see here I have like summing masters for drums, for bass, for rhythm guitars, for lead guitars, keyboards, orchestra, vocals. That's my usual setup. On that, the sum of those two tracks, I have an old trick that I use, the excellent CLA bass plugin from Waves, which does way too much when you put it on, in my opinion. But I found a way using the Blue Cat's Patchwork and load the VST version. Pro Tools use other plugin format, AX. But by wrapping and using the VST, I can use this with the mix function, and it stays really nice in phase actually while doing that. So I usually use this like 30% or something, and I can use the excellent stereo pitch thing, a little bit of the distortion, the roar mode, and in this one I actually use a little bit of the compressor as well, so it becomes a little bit like a parallel compressor on the bass as well. Okay, so and then it's the rhythm guitars, obviously. Here are like two main tracks and two main second pair, and then you can see there's some other stuff going on here, like a broken out when it goes alone in the beginning a little bit. Extra support, guitar 5 and 6 on a few of the chords that Peter did. And for the main ones, it sounds pretty edited, to be honest, those guitars, but it works in the mix. On the main ones, I'm using the BD 120. It's such a good plugin for rhythm guitars. With a modern cab, just, you know, it's pretty, just the way it is. No EQ, nothing. I'm just using it like that. If I would feel that I would need EQ on this, then of course I would put something on, maybe on some of the rhythm guitars or this. But, you know, if it sounds good, then don't touch it. And the guitar 3 and 4. A little sloppier playing maybe there. It's the BH4 plugin. On those, I'm using the vintage cab, which is not as scooped. It's a little bit more honkier and has a little bit more resonances, and I think that really fits. So the sum of those sounds pretty fat. And then it comes these guitar 5 and 6. For those, I kind of don't want to stack the same sounds. So on this one, I'm actually using another amp knob of ours, the 6606 from the BDH collection, it's called. Also very, very cool plugins. This is actually based on a modded amplifier that I have. I've been using it a lot in my productions over the years. All right, that's kind of it for the rhythm guitars. Then there are some add-ons, but before we get into that, you can see that I have a Pro G here. It's a plugin from FabFilter. It's a gate, and I'm using it in kind of a ducker mode. I have two of them here. You can see that I'm using them on the rhythm guitars, on the leads, the bass. And what I'm doing is that I'm sending a signal called the kick key and the snare key. And whenever the kick hits and whenever the snare hits, it has their individual duckers working on them. And that means that you kind of push away the bass, the rhythm guitars, and the leads a little bit as soon as the snare and kick hits. I don't always do it like this, but with this like slow pace thing, it's a way of making sure that the kick and snare are never masked. You kind of can't hear it. Like if you can hear it, it's too much, right? So I'm dialing that in with a range. For the snare here on the rhythm guitars, it's 1.8 dB, and for the kick on the rhythm guitars, it's like 1.4 dB. So no big moves here. On the bass, I have like 2 dB almost on the kick, a little less on the snare, 0.9. It gives a little bit of more room for the pulse. I usually do similar tricks when it comes to vocals. So if there are vocals on the song, I would kind of
feed that into a bus, limit it the hell out of it, and use it as a signal that could control various elements, like wave mechanics track spacer, for example, or some other ducker or compressor that could make elements like push away. It doesn't take away the need for automating your song or your mix. That's super important to do, to create the movements and the drama in the mix. But it can help on almost like a technical level to get the elements to really sit where they belong. So that's a pretty good tip. Let's check out here what we have more in this arrangement. On the lead master, we have some lead guitars. It's not much. It's in the intro, there's some octaver thing. Those come there as well. And then there are some cleaner guitars filling in on the picked chords. You can listen to those. Okay, you can hear those pulse quite a lot from the kick and snare, actually. Maybe that's too much, but can't say that I hear it. So on those, I'm using the Bad Boy, which is one of my favorite Ampknobs as well, from the BDM collection that we did. And then there comes in a few more leads in the end. Yeah, on that one I'm using the BD120 in channel 1 mode with a pedal and cab 2. That's also kind of a decision to finding a sound that's not already used in there. That way it's gonna be easier to mix it in. For those two, you can see also that I'm high cutting and low cutting a little bit to not, just add where their main focus is. It's also not something that I would do just per default. It would be something, I have a clear vision when I listen to it. It's like, okay, I need to tighten this up a little bit. So that's what I've done. I could add more, some delay on that as well, but there's so much going on, so I guess I didn't have the time. And then comes the end, this kind of that riff continuing with the clean guitars. Something processed from Peter, not sure what it is. And then I'm adding my own sounds to it to make it a little bit more, I didn't like the fact that it was so clean. I guess that's my main sound for the outro. That's also the Bad Boy. That's pretty cool. And then there's some octaver guitar racing in the end. I kind of make those guitars go from a cleaner thing into something more fussier. And then there are some keyboard elements, nothing too weird, I guess. Some explosions and stuff. We don't have to really go into this. We're interested in guitars, right? You can see that I haven't done much here either. Maybe one thing, like if I'm trying to mix keyboard sounds that are pretty mono-oriented, like this guy here, and I just, cannot fit it into the mix if they're in this part, there's freaking double kicks and everything, then I usually would do something like this. Using, for example, the Microshift, one of my favorite plugins from Soundtoys, distorting it and just separating it, taking it out of the center channel so it has a chance of actually being heard through the mix. Which it kind of doesn't have anyway, but you see my point. So one more thing, all of this goes out to a summing unit that I have into an SSL compressor that is actually not even moving for this right now. And then it comes back into an auxiliary channel here, that's what it's called in Pro Tools. From there I'm actually feeding to my recorder for this video. And then it's kind of standard thing that I have on my master, a few things at least. There's a little bit of EQ. I'm using a low cut here that I usually wouldn't print with, but I could have this on just to mimic what I might do in mastering. But I'm usually careful to print with that, but it's on now. also for the the YouTube format and whatever. It's a little bit of holding off the lows here, low mids or lows, and then a few pushes in the treble. I would imagine if this goes to mastering, I would like push the highs a little bit more, make it loud and clear, proud. Beyond that, one of the most important thing here is a limiter. This is also something that I would never print with, but I would always mix with it. Like I have it on my monitor, so that way I'm also kind of mimicking what's going to happen in mastering. It leaves me also with a lot of freedom to decide in mastering, like how much limiter I'm going to use, how much clipping am I going to use, so I can find the best way to reach the volume and glue that I need for the mix. So post that, I'm usually using a clipper. Here's the K-clip from excellent Castrog. Doing nothing other than having the crisp mode and the in plus 1.3 dB. It's basically just me lifting the output of this even more. Like if I send this to clients when I mix, I want it to be at a fairly competitive level. Either that or very quiet, so there are no like scenarios where they would confuse the mix for comparing with the mastered things and thinking that it sounds too dull. So if I need to raise that up, then I usually use a clipper like this. And for that, the K-clip is one of the most transparent clippers that you can use. Then there are two little more special things that I have on my master bus in this project. It's the stabilizer from Ozone, which is kind of a dangerous plugin that adapts your frequency response. It's like a dynamic EQ of sorts that works in some sort of spectrum mode, and it works towards a target curve. I'm using it with the rock preset and just a little bit. I would not use this to try to like EQ my mix. It's the wrong tool for that. But I do like the little dynamic aspect it has. It's kind of similar to when I do mastering. I have for 20 years I like the sound of the linear multiband compressor from Waves, like super long attack times, but just that little dynamic element that makes the song more alive and pleasant to listen to. So almost like the opposite of a compressor, I guess. Sometimes I've even been using it in like expander mode. Beyond that, pretty unorthodox thing here, I'm using the one knob pumper from Waves. And what I'm doing with this one, let's have a listen in a bit more extreme setting, because I'm using it very little, but let's see what this one does. Yeah, it pumps your track, right? I guess it's super convenient for like house music and stuff. It kind of helps me create the pumping effect without like over compressing. You can see this red line here. It's because I have automated this. So when these double kicks comes in the end, the pulsing got a little too much, because my mix bus compressor and everything is already working a little bit more. So I'm just bringing down that one knob a little bit for this. It's a pretty cool trick. And that's kind of it. That's what I'm doing in this mix. Of course, short and pretty easy track. But I hope that I've given you a few tips for your own mixing. So we have this, you buy 3 Ampknobs and you get one of them for free. We're starting to have a large collection of them right now. So check them out on the website, bogrendigital.com. There are free trials if you don't know which one to get, but can't go wrong with these. So have fun.